Based on water shortage tolerance, plants can be categorized into three. We have the three: xerophytes, mesophytes, and hydrophytes. I said based on water shortage tolerance. Xerophytes are the aquatic plants that can tolerate high level of water shortage. High level of water shortage. They are plants that can tolerate high level of water shortage. Xerophytes are plants you find in desert region where there is little or no water all around the year. Those are plants that can survive in such conditions. They are called xerophytes. Example of these plants are cactus plants. The cactus plants. Also pineapple. Pineapple is also categorized as a xerophyte. Then there's these categories of plants based on water shortage tolerance. We have the mesophytes. The mesophytes, they're actually most of the plants you have around in the terrestrial environment. They can tolerate medium or average level of water availability or water shortage. Average level of water, they can tolerate average level of water availability. They don't need too much water, neither do they need shortage of water. Your maize plant, your cowpea, your plantain, your yam tubers plant, these are all examples of mesophytes. And then the last categories are the hydrophytes. The hydrophytes, they are the plants that have low water shortage tolerance. Low water shortage tolerance. The meaning of that is that they cannot tolerate absence of water. They cannot tolerate the absence of water. The hydrophytes are actually the aquatic plants. They are the plants that are completely, either partially or completely submerged in the aquatic, in the water environment, or in the swampy environment. There are so many examples of the hydrophytic plants. You have the water hyacinths, the water lilies. They are hydrophytes. They are hydrophytic plants. That is based on water shortage tolerance for plants. At this point, also I want to mention that apart from plants, aquatic organisms, aquatic animals, they are also affected by the level of animals, not only aquatic, animals generally, either aquatic or terrestrial. They are also affected by the amount of water that is available. Animals generally, either aquatic or terrestrial animals, they are affected by the amount of water that is available. In fact, in the terrestrial environment, water availability to animals is a major factor that affects their survival. Some animals can migrate long distance in search of water for them to survive. They can migrate long distance in search of water for them to survive. So water availability affects animals in the terrestrial and also in the aquatic environment. Animals in the aquatic environment, because they are submerged in water, to regulate water will be a common challenge, because they are completely submerged in water. For them not to be drenched or soaked, let me use the word soaked or drenched in the water environment, they will need to overcome how to live. Aquatic organisms must have overcome how to be physically, structurally and metabolically stable even when they are submerged in water. So it's a major challenge for organisms in the aquatic environment to manage excess water availability. So having mentioned this, I would also like to talk about, still based on water availability, I would like to talk about salinity. Salinity of the environment. Salinity is also a major factor when you are talking about water factor. The level of salt content, in the water, and that is available to either the terrestrial organism or that is available to the aquatic organism. Okay, now for the organisms, for salinity, level of salinity, which is salt content, is also a very important is also a very important factor that affects organism. Based on salinity, organisms in the based on salinity, the aquatic environment, based on salinity, aquatic habitat is divided into freshwater, freshwater and saltwater or marine. Freshwater or saltwater or marine water. Based on salinity, we have freshwater habitat and we have saltwater habitat. Freshwater habitat are the habitats with low salt content, while marine or the saltwater habitat, they are habitats with very high water content. So based on salt content, different organisms in these different aquatic environments also have challenge of survive and need to overcome this challenge for them to survive in either the aquatic, in either the salt water or in either the freshwater environment. Now, the major way by which organisms survive or adapt to water salt content. The major way by which organisms adapt to water salt content is called osmoregulation. Osmoregulation. The way by which organisms adapt to salt water content of their environment through body is through osmoregulation. It's through osmoregulation. Osmoregulation is the regulation of the salt water content of the body of animals. Osmoregulation is a physiological mechanism through which organisms control or regulate the salt water or this water and solute content in their blood or in their body so that they can survive. Organism in the aquatic environment, in the freshwater environment, for instance, will have little problem with salt water balance. We have little problem with salt water balance. Their body content is is hypertonic. Their body salt content is hypertonic, that is, it has high concentration of salt compared to the external environment. So meaning for this organism to survive in freshwater environment, they will have to be taking in water. They will be taking in more water because the salt content in their blood is high compared to the environment. So for them to be osmoregulation, organisms in the aquatic environment will tend to be taking in water for them to osmoregulate their saltwater content. However, the reverse is the case for organisms in the marine or saltwater environment. For organisms in the marine environment, the salt content of the environment is higher than their body content. So this can lead to a situation in which the animal dies of dehydration. The animal dies of losing water, because the environment is hypertonic for salt. They will tend to be losing water out. However, different organisms in the aquatic environment have adapted differently to balancing the salt water content of their body. And based on salt water regulation called osmoregulation, organisms can be categorized as either osmoregulators, osmoregulators, and then some other organisms are osmoconformers, osmoregulators. Some organisms are osmoregulators, while some organisms in the aquatic environment, they are osmoconformers. The osmoconformers, okay. Now the osmoregulators, they are the organisms that will need to continually regulate their body contents to suit their environment, whereas the osmoconformers, they tend to keep their internal water salt content balance. The osmoconformers tend to keep their internal water content balanced with the salt water content or concentration of their environment. They tend to balance it at every point in time. They have developed mechanisms to balance their internal salt water content to that of the environment. So they conform. They are osmoconformers. Okay, they are osmoconformers. So based on osmoregulation, like I said, osmoregulation is the way in which organisms balance the salt water content of their body, and then based on that, organisms can be osmoregulators. Now, the osmoregulators can be categorized as either stenohaline, or urehaline. So the osmoregulators, organisms that regulate their salt water content of their body depending on the situation, can be categorized as stenohaline or urehaline. Now the haline is from the word salt. The stenohaline, they are the animals or aquatic organisms that can only tolerate a narrow range of salinity changes. They can only tolerate a narrow range of salinity changes. Stenohaline and organisms or animals, they can only tolerate narrow range, and if the range of salinity changes becomes too much, they will die. They won't survive. Stenohaline, an example of stenohaline, we have goldfish. Goldfish is a stenohaline organism. It can only survive a very narrow range of salt content, whereas there is this other category called the urehaline aquatic organisms, and are those aquatic organisms, they can survive a very wide range of salt changes. They can survive a very wide range of salinity changes. An example of urehaline fishes or organisms, we have salmon. Salmon is a fish. We also have a molly fish. Molly is a fish too. Salmon is a fish that can survive both in the freshwater environment, and it normally migrates depending on condition to the salt water. You see, it can survive a wide range of salinity changes. Salmon, they migrate from salt water to freshwater and back from freshwater to salt water. So salmon, they are called urehaline organisms, and these categories, they are osmoregulators, and they can regulate their internal salt content to suit that of the body, that of their environment, to suit that of their environment. And then the next category, they are the osmoconformers. They are organisms that normally balances their internal salt content to that of the environment. They change their internal content to whatever their external environment is. They conform. Anything, if the external environment, the salinity goes up, their body internal salt content also will increase, will also go up. They conform to their external environment in terms of salinity. and they are called conformers, osmoconformers. They are osmoconformers, and there are so many examples of osmoconformers, especially in the marine environment. In the marine environment, we have so many examples like the mussel. The mussel, we have the marine crab, the marine crab, the jellyfish, a lot of marine invertebrates. A lot of marine invertebrates, they are actually osmoconformers. A lot of marine invertebrates, the jellyfish, the sea star is also an osmoconformer. They regulate their salt content, their internal body salt content to suit that of their external environment. Okay, so they are osmoconformers. These categories, they are osmoconformers. And at this point, I want to mention that there are some marine organisms, cartilaginous fishes like sharks and rays. Cartilaginous fishes like sharks and rays, even though they are marine, they live in salt water. Cartilaginous fishes like sharks and rays, even though they are marines and they live in salt water environment, they are also osmoregulators. They are also what? Osmoregulators. They evolved adaptation to regulate, to keep their, they evolve adaptation to keep their internal body salt content constant, while to keep their external body content constant and different from that of their environment. Different from their environment. The fact that they are in marine environment does not mean that they have internal, does not mean that they are osmoconformers. They are not osmoconformers, they are also osmoregulator. The shark precisely uses some, they use the shark and the ray, they are able to regulate the salt content of their body by they store urea, they store urea and they store urea and they store urea trimethylamine oxide in their blood. The sharks and ray, they are osmoregulators. Even though they are living in the marine environment, they are still osmoregulators, and the way they are able to osmoregulate is that they store urea, they store urea and trimethylamine oxide. They store urea in their blood and trimethylamine oxide. They store urea and trimethylamine oxide in their blood. These chemicals enable them to keep a constant high salt level within them, such that within their blood, so that prevents excess inflow of salt water into their system. And the trimethylamine oxide prevents denaturation of protein within their body by the storage of urea. Urea can make their body's protein to denature. However, the presence of this chemical trimethylamine oxide prevents denaturation or degradation of protein within their body. And shark, for example, also have rectal glands that secrete urea. Sharks have rectal glands that secrete urea. So that is that for salt water balance as a factor, as an abiotic factor that influence organisms in their habitats. Before I leave that, I also want to mention that terrestrial organisms too, they are affected by salinity. Terrestrial organisms too they are affected by salinity. And the way in which terrestrial organisms regulate salinity is through evaporation and precipitation. They regulate salinity through evaporation and precipitation. That is how the terrestrial environment or habitat regulates salt content in the terrestrial environment. The terrestrial habitat regulates salt content through evaporation and precipitation. When during rainy season, it will be expected that the salt content in the terrestrial environment will be low because there is high introduction of fresh water from rain into the soil, so it will dilute the salt content. However, in the dry season, there will be more evaporation, and more evaporation of water will concentrate the soil content of the soil. So this is the way in which the terrestrial habitat regulates the salinity content of the environment, and this invariably affects the organism that lives in the terrestrial environment. So that takes me to the next abiotic factor, and that is topography. And that is what? Topography. Topography has to do with the form and features of land surfaces. Topography has to do with the form and the features you found in land surfaces. It has to do with the shapes, the slopes, the gradients you found in different land surfaces. From place to place, there are different land surfaces. Some places are lowlands, some places are highlands, some places are mountainous environment like the Mediterranean mountains. You see continuous mountains in those places, continuous peaks in those places. Whereas if you go to the desert, the arid desert, you will see lowlands full of sands, sand land, arid land. So this topography also affects the survival of organisms in this environment, decides the type of organism that can survive the topography. Now, there are three important factors when we are talking about topography. We are talking about one, altitude, which has to do with the height, the type of height. Are they high mountains there, or are they low valleys there, or they are just plain surfaces? The aspects, and then the gradient. These are factors when you are talking about topography of an environment. And then, having mentioned this brings me to the last abiotic factor that influence organism in the environment, and that is the edaphic stroke soil factor. The soil factor, the soil is very important, and we know that the soil is made from chemical weatherings of rocks over a long period of time, and the composition of the soil is decided by the bedrock, the components of the bedrock materials. The inorganic components of the soil is most often decided by the chemical composition of the bedrock materials from where they were weathered from. And then soil is very important because it is the medium for plant growth. And the plant grows on the soil, especially in the terrestrial environment. So soil is very important. So four main constituents of soil. We have the inorganic component or constituent, or you can also call that the mineral factors, the mineral matters of soil. The next component of soil, they are the organic matters in the soil. Then the next component of soil, we have the soil water. The soil water is another component of soil, and then the final constituent of soil is the soil air. All these four constituents of soil varies in their quantities and in their degree of availability depending on the type of soil that is present in a particular point, in a particular place or in a particular environment. And the type of soil greatly influence the type of animals and plants that you find in that environment. The type of soil decide the type of plant that can grow there, and invariably the type of animals that can survive in such an environment, because it is the type of plant that grows there that decide the food availability, and the food availability decide the type of plants, the type of animals that can feed on such food that is made available.